Central Oregon. Welcome to Talk Real Estate. I'm your host, Fred Johnson. Happy to be here today. Boy, what a stunning fall day. I'd recommend that if you want to enjoy some fall and enjoy some fall foliage and take a little walk, you should definitely get out there today. According to the weatherman, not always 100% correct, but according to the weatherman, we're going to get some wind and maybe a little bit of rain, which generally has a good impact on our fall foliage and knocks it down. So today may be your day. If you're at all interested, get your camera, get your dog, get somebody that you enjoy spending time with, and get out there and have some fun. But first, listen to my show. We're here today. We're gonna have a little bit of fun. Hopefully, you heard the lead in there that you can call in at any time. It's Let's Talk Real Estate. So if you feel like talking about real estate, or there's a question or a topic you'd like to discuss, feel free to call in on our line 541-388-1110. So we've got actually a pretty easy weekend. You know, this is one of those weekends that, you know, downtown isn't blocked off with, well, speaking of blocked off, we've got some road issues, but we'll talk about that when we talk a little bit about traffic. But you may have heard a sigh throughout the town. Those of you in town probably don't notice it that much. Those of you out of town, live on acreage properties, particularly those properties that enjoy a little bit of irrigation water, are somewhat relieved that the irrigation season is officially ended. And with that means that you get to take your hand lines and your pumps and drain them and drain the lines and hang them up and get it ready. And you're officially, you know, off the clock as far as your farming and ranching activities for the year. So, you know, for those of you that aren't familiar with irrigation, you know, irrigation water is a real wonderful addition to your property, particularly if you have irrigation or acreage. And each spring you get really enthusiastic because you're coming out of the long days of winter and actually the long nights of winter, and you know, you're excited to grow things and turn your place green and get it all going and all of that. And then about this time, about mid-October, you know, you look around and finally the ditch rider comes by and says, "Yep, we're gonna turn off the water." And you know, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a love-hate thing, but there's certainly a love and enthusiasm on the spring, and maybe a certain amount of relief on the back end when you get to see the end of irrigation season. So those of you that may be living near an irrigation canal may have noted that the canal level dropped down. And then what will happen now going through the winter months is we have what we call stock runs, which that's basically for your livestock, is where the word stock comes from. And for those people that have ponds that the animals use for their water source, it gives them an opportunity once a month to fill those ponds and fill that up. So now we're basically on stock runs through the winter months until next April when irrigation season starts again. So for those of you that are enjoying the end of irrigation, you know that today's the time to get out there and get your chores done and get all of that stuff put away. Otherwise, you're going to be out there doing that work when it's raining and blowing snow. Speaking of which, blowing snow. This is a non-denominational request to absolutely everybody out there. This is a good year to pray for snow. Each and every one of us could use a little bit of snow in our area, and you know, with fall comes winter, and a little bit of snowpack it would really help our area. So, you know, any way that you can, get out there and try to make that happen. So this is the time of the month, as many of you know, that the statistics start to come in. I'm a little bit early. I've only got one of my issues of statistics, so maybe I'll be able to share those with you next week. But really, all in all, the market trends seem to be such that the market's stabilizing quite nicely. And what that means is that for home buyers that are looking to get into a newer home, there's a fair amount of selection. There's some incentives. We're starting to see some things included in the sales price. You know, appliances or maybe some backyard landscape or some window coverings or some of that sort of thing as incentives to get into the newer homes. But the one real encouraging thing, there's two really encouraging things that have happened and are happening. One of which is with all of that new property, what it has allowed is a little bit of relief on the lower end of the market. I was out this week working with some folks that were in that, you know, at or about $200,000 price range. And unlike earlier in the year, there was actually some available properties for them to see and some different selections. So there was some choice. And with additional inventory, we've all heard, supply and demand, but sometimes we don't really want to acknowledge how the market works. But there's, as people have said for years, in real estate, there's always a market. It's always good for someone. Now, sometimes it's more difficult for someone trying to buy a home at or below replacement cost, and other times when the market's real soft, that's a great time to buy it at or below replacement cost. So the market is cyclical, but right now it seems that there seems to be a fairly equal balance, and what we'll be able to do is look at those and evaluate those numbers a little bit more when we're able to go over our statistics this next week. So last week we concluded with the 5 tips of negotiating a price on a piece of property, both buying and selling, and some of the things that you may want to look at. And this week I've got 12 tips for negotiation. Some of the things that you may want to look at when you're trying to negotiate your transaction. Both from the buyer and the seller perspective. It's every bit a key component to how you do in your real estate, your estate purchase. And obviously sometimes we're always just focused solely on sales price, and that's all it. And it really takes two people to be able, or two parties to be able to come together and to be able to negotiate, an agreement that works for both sides. And hopefully we'll be able to share some of those tips. And if that encourages you to give a call or ask a question, you're more than welcome to do that. A couple of the things for the good of the order that I wanted to bring up this week. I know any of you that have been listening regularly realize that if I have two things that I say fairly consistently, and that's that sometimes the information that we receive can be skewed a little bit statistically, and we receive information statistically, and we just take the statistic and take it as a fact, when in fact, if we sort of back up and realize that, if there's a 30% chance of something happening, that in reality means that there's a 70% chance of it not happening. And so when we're looking at the statistics and reading the newspaper and doing that sort of thing, I sort of like to take the opposing view from the media. Not that I'm trying to be defiant to the media, but just to sort of shed a little different perspective to it so that you, the listeners, can make decisions that work well for you out there. And on that, we have a couple of different things. There's been some discussion about traffic, which is a really, really big issue. And I think that maybe in some respects it doesn't get quite as much attention as it should. Another is some of the impact of the OSU. They kind of outlined their plans for growth and what their potential tuition, or not tuition, but their enrollment is going to be. And what I was going to do with that is just sort of break it out a little bit so that you get some idea of the numbers, so that it just sort of puts that into perspective. Also, we've got a whole bunch of apartments coming online, that's another one of those really good things. What it does is it creates more supply in the market. It should have some impact on rental rates. It should have some impact on vacancy factor. And, hopefully we'll see some relief, particularly in those sectors of the market that really need some relief, and we'll be able to talk about that. And then hopefully we'll have plenty of time to talk about negotiating our real estate transactions. So, remember, after the break, we're going to have a little break here now, I guess, and we're going to have a little break, and after that break, what we'll do is we'll talk through those items. Remember, anytime that you would like to contact me, you can always contact me at fred@dukewarner.com. That's if you want to send me an email. There's somebody you'd like to hear interviewed, which we have some exciting interviews coming up. You'd like to hear interviewed, a topic you'd like to have discussed at greater detail, you'd like to participate in some way, please feel free to do that. You can always call here at the station, and I give you that number frequently. So what we'll do after the break is we'll sort of hit on these high points, but then get back to some information that you could really use, and it might be a benefit to you. Thank you so much for tuning in to Talk Real Estate with Fred Johnson, and we'll talk to you after the break. Hello and welcome back. I'm Fred Johnson, and you're with Talk Real Estate. Our number here at the station is 541-388-1110. Feel free to call in if you have something you'd like to talk about, or you have any questions about something we might be talking about. So before we broke, I said that we were going to come back and talk about a couple of highlight issues, and then maybe get into some pointers that you might be able to use when you're negotiating your sale or your purchase. those are very interesting things. But let's first get through this. It's just sort of I like to do a little recap of some of the things that are in the news and talk about how they might affect us. And one of them I feel really quite strongly about. Those of you that maybe have been driving around town of recent have noted that since they closed off the Colorado Street Bridge, that we have a number of failing intersections in town, and I think that though the aesthetic of livability in Bend and what it's going to look like and all that sort of thing, I think that there's some acronyms that are used. I think that there are some sort of urban planning terms that are used that maybe not everybody thoroughly understands. And I thought that maybe what I would do is once again, from my perspective, really reinforce and emphasize how important it is for the city of Bend, if in fact, as most projections dictate, that we're going to double in size in the next 20 years, for us to really look at a comprehensive traffic plan and what that traffic plan looks like, and so that it has the ability to move not only the traffic that's required with the population that's here, but it's also able to absorb the additional impact of continued growth in population in our community. And it's not just, and we'll talk about those numbers in a minute, it's just not OSU Cascades. It's really a much larger issue than that. And so basically what we have now is there's and the two issues sort of interface with one another when we're talking about urban growth boundary, which we've discussed numerous times in the past, and how the city expands, but then how that property is zoned and what that scenario looks like when the projection of that traffic plan moves forward. And so basically the city is sort of evaluating, three distinct boundary expansion scenarios. And at the same time, they plan that what that plan is that's supposedly to deal and accommodate with the growth that would happen between now and 2028. And based on the models, they anticipate some really large, and like 27th Street, for instance, a 400% increase in traffic in that area. So when we're looking at that sort of impact, and the other areas were 27th Street, Reed Market Road, Knott Road, Mount Washington Drive, Southeast 15th. All of these areas are collector arterials. They're all projected to carry a fair amount of traffic. And as each and every one of us can know and appreciate, and we've observed this Reed Market Road, to go in after the fact and try to upgrade the facility to handle more traffic and be able to accommodate the response times necessary on those roadways and that sort of thing. It's really much easier to plan for it initially and build it right the first time than it is to try to go back in after the fact and make that happen. I think the city's done a remarkable job with what they had to work with. Obviously, Reed Market Road is one of the older roadways, older collectors in the southeast area, but it's taken, I'm sorry, I don't have that number, but it seemed to me it was like, $25 million in 4 years of time just to address that one arterial. So what they're doing is they're looking at a number of different traffic plans that sort of incorporate, and they're favoring at this point in time, I won't go into any great detail but at this time, but they're favoring scenario number 2. And the main reason for that is what it does is it creates mixed-use developments that are more compact. And this is one of those terms that, a lot of us hear this mixed use and maybe have an idea, maybe don't have an idea. But, basically, what that comes down to is really kind of throughout our history here in the West, we've had what we called the severalty, where you have a commercial district, a residential district, an industrial district, and they're all separated. They're in separate areas of the city, which means that those people that work and play in those areas need to commute from one area to another dependent upon what their daily activities may be. So that's what allows for the commuter traffic to go from the business district out to the residential district 2 times a day. And so one of the thoughts in this is if there's a little bit of a residential component, an office space component, and a retail component in the different neighborhoods, if you will, then the need to for transportation and the need for commuter traffic and commuter hours would be greatly minimized. And there's certainly a very, very valid point with that, to a point, at which time is it's much easier if the roadways are made very, very small and everything is really aesthetic along the streetscape. It's really easy to fail that model if it doubles in size and population. And I just think that that's one of the things that when we're looking forward in that plan, and again, I'm going to the west side because it's, this is an area where there's been a lot of median strips put in the road. Those median strips are really great. They're a traffic calming device. They slow traffic down because people want to go slower in narrower ways, but it doesn't really allow for a fire truck to go down that road if there's traffic in both of those lanes, because the two cars can't pull over far enough, and with the median in the middle of the road, the fire truck can't get past. Or the roundabouts. The roundabouts are really a great deal to move a moderate amount of traffic. It keeps things circulating. Nobody has to stop. In the event you do have a little fender bender, it's generally a glancing fender bender, and it's not a straight T-bone where somebody drives straight into the side of somebody. Generally, there's some artwork in the middle of those roundabouts, so it breaks up the line of sight so no one gets that boulevard fill where they can just push the gas pedal and crank it up to 60 miles an hour. But the problem with a roundabout is, let's say you do have an accident. Let's say that a truck goes through and its axle breaks in the middle of the roundabout. Well, now you don't have the ability to divert traffic. It plugs up in 4 different directions and goes all different directions. So as we rely on those things in our plan, looking here and now at things that are aesthetically really appealing and work really, really well, the Reed Market Bridge. Beautiful bridge, beautiful median, beautiful parkway. Really, for all of the expense and all that happened there, it really doesn't carry an awful lot of traffic. So anyway, as you get the opportunity, basically these advisors are going to answer to the city council. Then, of course, the city council will then have to take their traffic plan on to the state level for its approval. But be involved and take a look at that and see how it affects you. See if you have strong feelings about it, and if you do have strong feelings about it, let those feelings be known. The other one I'll just hit here kind of quickly before the break is it was kind of interesting that the OSU Cascades came out with their growth plan, and we've heard all of these, fear, and obviously we've had different opposing views on the site selection and all of that sort of thing, and how it's going to dramatically impact the west side. And what I was hopeful to do today was just to sort of give you a couple of numbers to maybe put that in perspective a little bit, if you will. And that's that, they're anticipating that the total enrollment over a 5-year period of time will be 5,000 students. Well, our current enrollment at COCC is, I believe, 16,000. Is 16,000 this year. Yes, it was 18,000 last year, and it reduced by 2,000. They're anticipating this annual enrollment deal. And when you go to Corvallis, Corvallis has 30,000 students. So the impact of 5,000 students isn't the mental image that a lot of people receive when they go, wow, Oregon State's coming, so it's going to turn into Corvallis over there on the west side. It's nowhere near that large in dimension or scope. And there's a number of years for the planning and the mitigation for the traffic and the different components that are coming in that area. So once again, when you hear the terms and when you hear percentages or you have a mental image, really kind of just take the time to look at what it really means. And this year, they're planning on having about 1,900 students. Well, they lost over 2,000 students at COCC, so that's really sort of a lateral move. It's really not a huge impact. Welcome back. Here we are at Talk Real Estate. I'm Fred Johnson. I'm your host. Happy to be here today. Our number at the station is 541-388-1110. So before the break, we were talking about just some of the basic stuff, some of the traffic, and how OSU Cascades is going to have an impact on our area, but sometimes that might be a little bit of an inflated view as far as the total numbers and the total amount of impact. We have more people moving to Bend times 3 than what the enrollment will be at OSU at this point in time and for the last couple of years. And another interesting little side note, and it doesn't really mean anything, but, an interesting demographic change is OSU is expected to see a fairly large increase in Hispanic students. And Hispanic students will make up about 1/4 of the high school graduates by 2018. So we're going to see much more diversity in our community as well. And another one of the interesting demographic items that came up, which I think goes back to the planning issues that we have, is that of the numbers of the people that have been moving into Bend, nearly 18% of those have been 65 years of age and older. So we're seeing a number of people that are moving here for quality of life and obvious access to the different facilities, wanting to be closer to families. But that's also going to have some impact on how we plan our city, how they're able to get around, because if they're 65 now, it's over the next 10 years, that's going to increase a little bit, and their mobility and their access to different things. Our town should take that into the plan as well. One of the interesting things too, and I won't get off on a whole bunch of this, but there's nearly 1,500 apartments that are currently under construction. And through the years between 2004 and 2013, there was virtually no building. And what had happened, prior to the recession or the reset or whatever you want to call it, even some of the larger apartment complexes were converted into condominiums, and so it took that inventory out of the market. So, what we've seen is a real shortage, and as you look at these, we can get caught up with, their location and number of units and all of that sort of thing. But even in the projection information, looking forward, they're seeing some adjustment in those rental rates. They're seeing some adjustment that's moving them down. There's one development in particular. I won't talk about all of them, but in the Southeast Bend area, BPM Real Estate Group of Portland is developing 9 apartment buildings for a total of 228 units. They'll do it in 2 phases, and it's called Seasons at Farmington Reserve. It's on Alstrip Road. And the thing that's quite interesting about that is they said that these apartment leases are expected to range from $650 to $1,350, which really sounds like quite a relief. And there's that's only 200 of the 1,500 units that are planning on coming online. So I'm really hopeful for all of us here in our community that we're able to see a little bit of help with those rental rates. Well, look at this. I think we might have a phone call coming in. Let's see if we can get him. Hello there. You're on the air.
Hi, this is Vic Tobias, and I just need a phone number for Kelly Blyer and an email.
Well, I'm sorry, sir. I got you online. You're calling the radio station, and I've actually got you on the air. I'm sorry. I don't have that information, but let me put you on hold and see if I can get it for you.
I do have a story for you. Let's go with it.
Okay, let's run.
So on October 24th at 12 o'clock, we're going to dedicate the Oregon Medal of Honor exhibit at Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum in McMinnville, Oregon.
Okay.
The exhibit honors Oregon's 26 Medal of Honor recipients from the Civil War to Vietnam. Amongst them is Bob Maxwell from Bend, who was our nation's oldest living Medal of Honor recipient.
Right.
The dedication will coincide with his 95th birthday, so if anyone wants to do a story or come and see the exhibit, they're welcome to do it at any time. It's already open.
Perfect. And what's the date again?
October 24th, Saturday at 12 o'clock at Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum in McMinnville, Oregon.
Well, great, sir. Thank you so much for calling in and sharing that with our listeners, and hopefully we'll get some representatives from Central Oregon over there to participate, and I'll share this information with Kelly.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for calling in, sir. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Bye now. Well, that was a little detour, but, it's fun to have somebody call in, keep me on my toes. So let me see, where were we going? We were going to do a 12 negotiation tips every homeowner should know. Last week we closed with, we had 5 negotiating tips, and I'll just give you the recap on those. To do your research, if at all possible, try to keep your motivations private. That certainly strengthens your ability to negotiate. If you can find out the seller's motivation so that you can move toward that, that's obviously always something good to do. to be prudent with your request for repairs. Sometimes that can really grow into a hot issue, to where, we're a little more attached to our homes, particularly after we've lived with them and had memories in them for some time. So when someone comes along and says, hey, you live in a piece of junk here and I want all this stuff done, there's sometimes people get offended by that. And then the other one, this is one that's kind of interesting as an active real estate broker. Everybody has an idea about, how it should be, or they've read an article, or their lender has told them to be sure that you ask the seller to pay your closing costs. And, that is good. That's certainly very helpful. It certainly leverages your money up front when you're trying to buy your house, meaning that, if you get $10,000 worth of help up front, it's a lot better than getting $10,000 worth of a price reduction on the back. It means less money out of your pocket at close of escrow, and it's certainly a great way to go. However, when the market is relatively tight and we're competitive for trying to buy homes, to try to get get the seller to maybe be a little softer on his price and pay part of your closing costs sometimes might be a bit of a stretch, and someone that comes in with a cash offer with no contingency is certainly going to get the offer over someone asking for some seller participation. But so that was the big. Let me get rid of this 1,500 apartments that we have here. That was the big negotiation tips from last week. This week, what we've got is 12 negotiating tips that every homeowner should know. And as we look at the market and we go into the market, there's some things that you can do to make yourself better suited to participate in the process. And obviously the first of those is to get your finances in order. And it's a good idea to get that done before you go out and you start to look. It doesn't cost a thing to go talk with your mortgage broker, maybe even talk with a mortgage broker too, to see if there's one that maybe you like their style, you like their motivation, you like what they say, you like their fees. It's not all about just the percentage rate or just the loan origination amount. There's much more to it than that. And obviously, it's just like something I learned this week that, a lot of the online ads where we see these interest rates that are just, unheard of, and you haven't seen them in this area. Well, it's legal to advertise a 30-year fixed loan, at whatever rate it is. So these adjustable rate mortgages and the longer arms, the ones that have like a 7-year arm or whatever, but then it ultimately reverts to a long-term fixed rate at whatever it is at that time. So even though they offer a loss, let's say right now it's 3.23%, which you can't get that in a 30-year fixed anywhere here in town. It's still legal to advertise that, and it's not until you get close and you interview somebody that you sort of find out the specifics of what that 3.23 comes down to. So before you go shop, to get your money in order is certainly a great way to do it. In car talk, you go out shopping for Cadillacs and then find out you can afford a Volkswagen. It's just not quite as much fun to round down like that. If you shop for Volkswagen and find out you can afford a Cadillac, hey, that might be kind of fun. Kind of not get too caught up on the small stuff. And by that, it's really easy to say that, $5,000 or $10,000 isn't a lot of money. Well, it is a lot of money, and it's a lot of money to each and every one of us. But if it's built into the loan, the amount of difference that it's going to make for the loan payment to, maybe spend $5,000 more than you'd anticipated, or, $10,000 more than you'd anticipated, really on a monthly basis isn't going to make that big a difference. And so sometimes we get really kind of caught up on what that looks like. And I'll hit number 3 here kind of quickly, which is to base your offer on home values, not on the list price. Again, we have an awful lot of new agents coming into the market that are willing to do what we call buy listings. And so there's some listings that are out there that are overpriced, that may be a little overstated for what can be supported by comparative market analysis in that area. So when you get ready to make your offer, it's kind of nice to have some idea of what's been happening in that area. And if the market's trending up and you go, okay, well, the the stuff that's sold in the past sold for this, maybe we can make an adjustment. So we'll talk more about these 12 tips that you can use when we get back after the break. And thank you for tuning in to Talk Real Estate. I'm Fred Johnson. I'm your host, and I'll talk to you real soon. Hello, Central Oregon. Welcome back. Here with Talk Real Estate. I'm Fred Johnson. I'm your host. Happy to have you with us today. Again, get out there and enjoy this day. It's a beautiful fall day. I can see that the wind's picking up, the leaves are going, and we might not have much more of this beautiful color up above us here for very much longer. So get out there and make some memories. So before we broke, we were just getting started with the 12 steps in purchasing a home that every home buyer should know. And we started with to get your finances in order. Don't get too hung up on a small differential in price, and base your offer on the home value and not necessarily on the listed price. And the next couple of items here are sort of interesting. And the reason that it's important to get out and actually get into some of these properties is so that when you see a good deal, you know that it's a good deal and you can make the move. So if you see something that you like and it's time to go, make that move. It's time to go. It's not time to go home and we'll sleep about it and we'll talk about it. We'll call you on Monday, because there's a good possibility that it may not be available on Monday. And let's see here. I think we might have someone calling in.
Hey, Fred.
Hi there. You're on the air.
Hey, Fred. This is Mike outside Northeast Bend. Thanks for your courtesy and having this little call-in show and stuff. I really appreciate it.
Mike, well, thank you for calling in. I got your stuff this week.
I didn't catch your question.
I said I got your stuff this week, and thank you very much.
Oh, good. I hope you can use it.
Yes.
First of all, I wanted to thank you for being so level-headed about the way you present the whole traffic matter the way you did. I was actually able to think it out a little clearer. So here's what I have.
Okay.
OSU in its Century Drive location does not increase the number of people going to the college in Bend. However, it does relocate them to the bottleneck of Bend. And if you're looking at that aerial photograph I sent you,
yes, sir,
you can see the S shape of the Deschutes River, the downtown core, Aubrey Butte, and Century Drive is the very bottleneck that if you want to kill the golden goose of the ski resort, you just block Century Drive every business day so skiers can't get there. And the way to do that is to put 1,000 extra right at the place where you can cascade fail, no pun intended, the very Century Drive that makes Bend what it is.
Well,
that was the...
And I agree with that. I would think that if we were looking long term, if we could, break out our crystal ball and hope for the best, to have our collector arterials be less obstructed, and to possibly get another bridge crossing somewhere across the river would do an awful lot to mitigate the anticipated growth with or without Oregon State.
I agree.
It's one of those things that it seems to that the three big issues from my perspective are traffic, sewer, and water. And those are the infrastructure. If in fact we're going to have a town that's going to double in population, those are the things that really need the enhancements to be able to accommodate that growth.
I couldn't agree more. One thing that I can't understand is that you're not getting all the kinds of people all day calling your show expressing one opinion or the other. Like maybe they agree with me that we should go with the will of the people and the 2008 UGB map, and expand Northeast Bend. Maybe people think otherwise. But I wonder if people are scared or bored or uninformed.
Well, I think that it's
turned down 300 acres for their first offer by the city council, 300 acres by Councilor Chudowski, which is a land-grant university's dream.
Sure.
And instead they bought 10 or 12 acres, paying millions for it instead of being given a half square mile or so.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that's really kind of interesting in the whole process. It's not specific to Bend. It seems that it's everywhere, but it seems that, somehow or another through the process, there's more emphasis put on the process than there is, the impact sometimes.
And on the variables. That's nicely put, Fred.
And the people, it seems that the vocal few really drive the bus. They really have the decisions made because they're there. They understand the the meetings. They understand when there's going to be public hearings, when there isn't going to be public hearings, and can meet that criteria where, they used to call it the silent majority, just sits at home and kind of wonders, what's happening.
Mm-hmm. And once in my life, I tried to rise to the challenge starting in 2005 because the bulletin was saying we had an affordable housing problem in 2005, so we had to enact a UGB move. So it took 3 years for Bend to gather, and it was such big crowds they had to go to bigger buildings to do it. And I remember distinctly making my own presentations, and it took 3 years for us to come up with a very intelligent, smart plan. But what I'm really upset about, and I hope you can pick that up, is that Salem is depleting Bend's capital and our resources by delaying. And OSU Cascades is just part of that, putting that on Century Drive. Because let's imagine, what if we had passed the UGB? That university would be like 6 years old now, and a square mile, and McDonnell Douglas and Boeing would be there, government contracts and all that. But because it's obfuscated in this kind of stasis or deterrent kind of thing on Century Drive, we'll never have those people, because where's a person going to buy a lot on Century Drive to do a little bit of work for a grant or research or to service the university needs? Mm-hmm. There was 1,000 lots that were going to be available for you, me, your kids, my kids to buy a lot and serve the OSU Cascades or the university in Northeast Bend.
Well, and I think that again,
you want to buy Safeway across the street from OSU.
Again, this is really, an indicator of the public process trying to drive the process and not allowing more of it to be opened up for, private enterprise, if you will. We've got the city of Bend in the land development business there in the project that you're discussing. We've got
which one?
In the Juniper Ridge project, and then we've got LCDC, this land use issue that dictates the 20 years worth of inventory that was written in the 70s, really mandates that there's a process that goes through. And thank goodness for someone like Newt Buehler who got it through this last year, so that at least portions of the presentation can be accepted instead of it being an all or nothing, which is what you're referencing. It was all or nothing. And all of the years, all of the hours of great work were put into that. And because of a couple of minor discrepancies in it, the whole thing was thrown out instead of being able to...
with a 100-page letter, 100 pages of no from Salem. It seems like everyone plays safe, and so the local renter, the local worker, the local poor person, the local person seeking a loan, we're all being brought down, including by this stasis that man is bad, so we shouldn't take that giant amount of land and let our land prices not blow up like they're imminently and currently doing.
Well, Mike,
I appreciate having more appreciation of my land, but I'm also not a selfish person. I know if we bring Bend to its knees and I make a few bucks, that's not really the good goal.
Well, Mike, we're running out of time for this week. I really appreciate you giving a call and staying on top of it. Please keep the cards and letters coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you, folks, for tuning in today to talk real estate. I realize we didn't get through all 12 of our negotiating points, but the most important thing is to surround yourself with people that have had the experience and can help you do the negotiation and let you know when you're being reasonable and when you're being unreasonable. But the most important thing is to get out there and make sure that you've got a home going into winter.